Коллеги, всем привет. Меня действительно зовут Ирина Zinovkina.
Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, indeed, my name is Irina Zinovkina, and indeed, I'm the head of a research group at Positive Technologies. It's a pleasure and a privilege to sort of officially open this bit of the conference, and I'm here to briefly tell you where we are going when it comes to incident detection and response, and whether unmanned SOC is a possibility and what kind of products it can rely on. Also, I will take your questions, if any. See, we have this QR code here in the screen. You can follow it to ask any questions you may have. At the end of my presentation, I'll try to address your questions.
Так, ну, с этим слайдом в целом я, наверное, закончила. Немного обо мне. Этот слайд был обязательный.
I should probably give you a brief description of who I am. I was told this is a mandatory slide, but I don't feel comfortable about it, so let's skip it. Now, I do investigations, which means that I gotta start with figures, because, you know, figures and numbers is our daily bread, so to speak. Now, the number of attacks keeps growing with every passing year. According to the data we have collected in 2023, the number of successful attacks grew by 18% year on year. And note, it's not just the sheer number of attacks, but the quality of attacks keeps growing, meaning that the fallout of these attacks keeps growing. Moreover, inadmissible events triggered by these attacks also keep growing. Now, why the number of attacks is growing sort of goes without saying. I should probably mention here that these things are getting automated. I mean, new industries are going through, yet another automation exercise, and obviously this means more systems are added to the internal perimeter or the external perimeter. And naturally, perpetrators are also gearing up. They're using AI for OSINT purposes. They also use AI for social engineering or for payload generation. By the way, if you are interested in application of AI, for attacks, I will be speaking at Galactica at 7 p.m. talking about application of AI in offense. So if you're interested, please do attend this presentation. Late last year, together from our colleagues from the PT investigation teams, we did this little study where we analyzed, all the data collected between 2021 and 23. And the statistics we have collected will go a long way in terms of proving why SOCs, as we know them, are no longer very effective. Now, this important figure here, the average time a perpetrator was able to persist unseen on the infrastructure is 45 days. That's the average. That's obviously not max. Max we registered was like 3 years. In the majority of cases, when we started our investigation, we were able to find perps either embedded in the infrastructure or, still having intact links to the infrastructure. Now, in the functioning of a SOC, there are components that everybody knows. Products like this have been mentioned so many times during day one, and you will hear so many more times because it's a large festival, lots of reports. But in general, when you hear numbers like 45 days or this colossal growth in the number of attacks or how companies get hacked, it naturally leads us to the conclusion that the landscape of cyber threats out there is apparently much more complex than what SOCs can respond to. So what's wrong with it? There are some factors we can clearly point out why SOCs are not very effective already or will cease to be effective very soon. Now, you don't really get to see some of the important surfaces, some of the elements of infrastructure. Sometimes analysts do not have enough context to analyze information security events. So they have to manually collect this context using different data sources. And that obviously means that the time required for incident investigation and response gets much longer. By the way, there are so many data sources, including telemetry and others, and they're not integrated, which means that the time required gets even longer. Any InfoSec conference, we will be talking about how difficult it is for us to work in collaboration with the IT division. Naturally, you also need to do logging of all your sources, which means that the number of events in the InfoSec field starts mushrooming. You get more and more false positives, and therefore SOC analysts can easily lose track of a real incident. And cyber threats targeting, say, enterprises can be quite difficult to detect. For example, once a perp has infiltrated in your infrastructure, they may be trying to use some legitimate assets and resources to camouflage whatever they are doing. And if all this keeps going to SIEM, you will be overwhelmed. Like, if you consider all the activities of legitimate users as potentially dubious, how can you operate? Moreover, at any stage of detection, investigation, or response, there will be things that are either not automated or not automated enough. Now, we are showing them here stage by stage, trying to kind of analyze what it could potentially lead to, that, there's still manual tasks involved here. Now, for example, modeling the threats and defining attack chains, developing connectors and rules, so many data sources, so many data formats, which currently are something that CMs cannot read. Now, all this means that business risks are considered separately from InfoSec monitoring. So when an analyst sees an alert in the system and starts addressing a particular event, there will be a risk of a kind of a blind area, something related to events that have not been processed yet. I'm going to mention like 5 more times, but this is one of the key issues resulting in us thinking that we need to sort of develop an unmanned SOC. Well, because, your analysts are distracted by the false positives, they can easily miss out on a real incident, which can result in as much as bankruptcy. There were cases like this in 2023. Now, when an analyst is already addressing an incident, in many cases, they will need to enrich the context. And very often, they will not have enough data to do that. And therefore, they will need to assess how critical it is. Like, they have a threat model, which could have been designed manually or in a semi-automated manner. So they will try to prioritize incidents using this model. And, there are issues potentially happening at that stage as well. Now, if we are talking about things happening after we've, done our homework and we realize what we're doing wrong, another important impact of lack of automation is that the real response time can easily be longer than the attack time, which sounds pretty bad, right? And if you're an InfoSec professional, it doesn't just sound bad, it hurts. Moreover, we need to make sure that nobody is persisting in our infrastructure. Like I said, some companies have had things like this for 3 years and more. So we need to know how to react and how to change our reaction and response scenarios. So finally, after this segue, we turn to this concept of unmanned SOCs. I understand you may dislike the term, but this is the term I will be using throughout the presentation. Sorry about that.
Про что мы говорим?
At the conceptual level, what are we talking about? When we are talking about something unmanned, naturally we refer to sort of automation, right? In an ideal world, your system should know the topology of the network, should be able to build potential attack graphs, should be able to request context from different sources. When all these processes are automated one day, like they must be automated, it's a matter of when, not if. So they must be automated in synergy with each other. I mean, the existing processes should be automated together. It's the only way it will be feasible. AI, our beloved AI. By the way, we had a very good section on that yesterday. The recording should already be available from what I know. And we'll keep coming back to this discussion of AI so many times more during the festival. Now, the boom of AI has already impacted our daily lives. Moreover, it has impacted our understanding of cybersecurity and, what threat actors are doing. Actually, there are lots of companies now that claim we have implemented, our ML, which is doing something incredible. And it sounds like a marketing pitch. I wish there was more there. There were more there in terms of the real implementations. Now, if we are talking about unmanned operation, like an ideal unmanned SOC should make all the decisions, right? If it's unmanned. And that means that the expertise built into it and the analytical capabilities built into it should be very advanced. Moreover, it should be able to self-learn, right? Like the system learns from the incoming attacks, learns to predict more attacks like this. And, if a new type of attack comes in, it should be able to rewire itself and launch a response scenario if that's what's required. Bit of mathematics. So it all says things like automation, adaptation, analytics means being totally autonomous. Now, total or full autonomy, as implied here, should be explained. Like previously, offers from different vendors were along the lines of, okay, we're gonna support decision-making by SOC people. However, for a totally unmanned SOC, the paradigm is different. Like, we are developing a solution that will respond on its own, while the SOC analyst will simply do the checking when required. It will be a reviewer, an editor of the process, but the system should be able to stand on its own feet without such an intervention. Now, this concept of 4As I showed in my previous slide is all very well, but I should probably tell you a bit more about the features of an unmanned SOC as we see it. I've mentioned that there are numerous sources of telemetry data, and their integration naturally needs to be automated. Like, this is the first challenge you run into as you implement your SIEM system. So many sources, and very often you won't have enough connectors. Which means that you have to devise them on your own, sometimes going down to the data format nitty-gritty. And then, once you've started your SIEM, you discover that you need to do some further integration whenever a vendor changes something. So you will need to collect event data which will be sufficient to support your investigation without being over the board, without sort of, creating too much data noise. Many vendors are already going in this direction. Well, we're trying not to advertise any particular vendor here. Like, we are doing something along these lines at Positive Technologies. If you're interested, well, we have people who'll be happy to tell about it, but it's not a marketing presentation. I'm just trying to give you an overview of what's happening in the markets. Some vendors are trying, for example, to mark the data up before they submit it to the CM. And this is certainly a good development. This is one of the moments when I'm saying that we certainly have to deal with so many data points, and that results in lots and lots of false positives. Now, if we believe that all these data points are going to come to the SIEM and the analysts will be very unhappy and will have a burnout and will demand a salary increase, now, if this is the assumption, then it's only natural that we may want to automate such data processing. So modules that will sort of automatically request the data that correlates to a particular event sound like a good idea, and some CMs already have them. So here we're talking about introduction of algorithms that will look at the causal relationships, something that I should probably talk about a bit later, but the general idea here is the way that SOCs operate will be about reacting to event chains as opposed to individual events. Now, as regards implementation of behavior analysis algorithms, something has been around in the market for quite some time. In numerous InfoSec solutions, you can find something like this already, although vendors will differ in terms of how they implement it. But naturally, without behavior analysis, a SOC of the future is quite pessimistic. Now, automated context enrichment. It is important to have something that will automatically enrich a correlated event, will also, point out the nodes that have been impacted and the accounts that have been compromised, which is something that is still currently done in most cases by the analysts. Exceptions, there are some exceptions, that's right. By the way, we've published a study on that particular matter. So when I say some vendors are doing this, and in this study, you can actually find the specific names if you're interested, and I'll provide the link later. But I'm trying not to make any ads here. Now, this one is about structuring kill chains. Now, in the SOC of the future, we should have algorithms that should be able to analyze potential relationships between different assets, different events, identify anomalous developments, and also suggest the next place to look at. So again, without such a feature, a SOC of the future cannot exist. Now, when we're talking, for example, about a network topology at the threat modeling stage, like we see what's happening right now, and we have our threat model, but the moment things start coming in and going out of your system, your threat model becomes sort of irrelevant. And this is something you certainly don't want to happen to your SOC of the future. It should be extremely up to date. It should have visibility of all the assets within your perimeter. So the SOC of the future should be able to see all the assets available without manual intervention. So threat modeling. Now, threat modeling should be based not on the InfoSec events as such, but rather on event chains or kill chains that would diminish the workload for our analysts, although we are talking about an unmanned SOC here, so eventually there will be very little work for the humans. Now, as regards incident response scenarios, XDR systems are already some help for CMs. So, for example, at an endpoint, it should be able to kind of filter out the things that are not really needed and send the rest to the CM. But in the SOC of the future, the system should be able to decide on its own whether it's an incident or not, and how to classify it, and what to block, such as devices or accounts. And will do everything on its own, while the analysts can simply come in and check it. As regards embedded expertise, I've touched upon the subject when I talked about AI. Now, the general idea here is that response of the future, and it may sound fancy, but ideally it should touch upon let me put it differently. It should be either a fully autonomous or a co-pilot kind of system, so that your analysts can respond to incidents much better. And finally, decision-making. So eventually, we want the system to be able to make all the decisions, while we are more in a kind of a support role. Efficiency metrics, something that you will hear banded around by so many vendors when they talk about their products. So they will be telling you about the importance of some metrics and not the others. In an unmanned SOC, some metrics will probably be deprecated. For example, time to respond, or the time taken by the analyst to see if it's an event or not and how critical it is. Like, we are sort of expecting unmanned systems to do it all, and then, all these metrics can easily be converged into one. Or take metrics such as TTA and TTC, like if you expect the machine to respond to an incident so that it develops IR scenarios and implement them, well, then such metrics can easily be kind of conflated or merged, so that you should be able to measure the efficiency of your SOC in a different way. I should also mention here that blocking inadmissible events will be the key criterion. So in the SOC of the future, this should be the key parameter. And metrics in an unmanned SOC will probably be less about seconds or days, but rather they should be about, the number of steps.
Наши исследования вы можете посмотреть по QR-кодам. Исследования, которые связаны с...
You can find our studies following these QR codes, and we have one of the studies published in our global version of the website. We publish lots and lots of studies. And, they are much more profound than just, do you know how many different attacks have happened? We also share our internal expertise. We do have a lot of it. But we also analyze external sources. We run some correlations at the moment. It's not automated, unfortunately. So if you care to check them out, please do. We'll be happy if you read it. No registration required. You don't need to send anything or receive any short text. Just check the studies out. So we publish some of our studies in our social media. Maybe we'll talk about unmanned SOCs one day as well. So please subscribe to us. That's the end of my main presentation.
Спасибо, Ир. Друзья, я хочу напомнить,
Yes, thank you, Ira.
Работает чат-бот, в котором...
Please note, we have a chat bot. So if you have any questions for the speakers, please use the chat bot. It's available on Telegram. The QR codes are currently shown.
В онлайне, в трансляции они тоже публикуются. Вот, собственно, вопросы из чат-бота. Ир, позволишь?
So these questions are coming from the chat bot. Now, in an unmanned SOC, shall we have an unmanned red team? Or rather, if we have one? I think I should answer this by saying that, it sounds like a great idea. Well, currently there is no such thing as a fully unmanned SOC. It's a thing of the future. But very few things are totally impossible in this world. So if we imagine an unmanned SOC, yes, indeed, an unmanned red team should be a possibility as well. And who is going to win? Friendship certainly will not win. Well, I would love to root for my own company here, but, who am I to tell about what the future will bring? Certainly, it's a no investment recommendation. Now, if SOC is unmanned, Will analysts be out of job? Certainly not. This will be covered by the other speakers. They will be talking about specific applications of AI, but the short answer is no. I've already said that the workload for the analysts will go down, but you will still need analysts to double-check if the machine is doing what it should be doing. So analysts will also be involved in setting the system up and configuring it. So we're not saying that unmanned SOCs will kick people out of their jobs, but they will make their work more effective.
Тогда задачи между аналитиками могут быть распределены.
And how do you then distribute the workload between analysts in an unmanned SOC? I think we'll no longer be talking about lines as we currently do at various SOCs. I actually know that some SOCs have dispensed with lines completely. So we'll say goodbye to this concept. Other than that, I think that analysts will be distributed depending on the kind of tasks and, key problem areas your SOCs has and the level of autonomy of your SOC.
Заключительный, наверное, вопрос.
And the final one.
Для беспилотного СОК нужна идеальная инфраструктура с инвентаризацией.
An unmanned SOC probably needs ideal infrastructure with, kind of a stock taking or, inventory taking regular exercise for all the assets. And currently, nobody seems to have it. How do we get there? And how do we come to the right agreement with IT?
Но в целом это вопрос риторический, как договориться с IT.
Sounds like a rhetorical question. I think in many other sections, this particular issue gets covered.
Нету сейчас идеального чего-то там, и его, скорее всего, не будет. Но мы же говорим о будущем. Сейчас, конечно, построить беспилотный СОК на том, что есть, даже у организаций, которые уже подошли к высокому уровню зрелости, понимают, что такое киберустойчивость, кибериспытания и все, что обсуждается.
And I'm talking here about, matured teams.
Даже они не готовы пока к внедрению беспилотных СОКов, поэтому...
Many companies are not prepared for introduction of unmanned SOCs.